If you can make it work in your current 9 to 5 for another year or two before jumping into entrepreneurship, there are a few things that you can and should do while you're still employed. And if you're currently unemployed, but you have some months of savings, then these are things that you can also do too because they cost $0. Hey there, I'm Kathleen, and I'm your 9 to 5 escape artist meets transition strategist. I help women navigate life and career shifts with more ease and less chaos. Be sure to check out my Substack, where I write for women who know they're meant for more than just the corporate grind. And in today's video, I'm going to share 3 things that you can do to start your business with $0, whether you're employed or not. And I'm going to be focusing mostly on online businesses and service-based businesses. So let's talk about it. You've probably heard people say to start your side hustles, start working in your business while you're still employed, while you're still in a 9 to 5. And as long as you're not in a toxic work environment, I agree with that. But that's not always an option for people. And I talk a bit more about that in a recent video, so be sure to check that out. When you know that you want more ownership over your time and your energy, and you want more freedom without compromising your stability, and when you know that you won't work in traditional jobs forever, but maybe you're not sure what that looks like yet, just know that you have options. Some people will work in their day job while also working on their business intentionally. Like they have no plans to work as a full-time entrepreneur or be self-employed full-time. But then many people do plan to retire from corporate and work, for themselves full-time. Let me know in the comments, are you wanting to go into full-time entrepreneurship eventually, or do you want to keep a 9 to 5 and still have your own business as additional income? Because, regardless of what path you take, shifting from being an employee to an entrepreneur or self-employment, freelance, working for yourself in any capacity, it is a transition and that takes time. And it also takes some time before your business starts generating revenue. And it might take even more time than that to be making a profit, to be profitable. Those are two different things. Just because you're generating revenue doesn't mean you're profitable yet. But one of the things that you really need as an entrepreneur are systems. And if you want to know some systems that you can start working on or start creating before launching your business, subscribe to my free newsletter on Substack and you'll receive the Jumpstart Checklist, which is a tool that will go through some of the systems that you can start before launching your business. When you're in the ideation phase or initiation phase of launching your business and you're pre-revenue, you don't need the perfect idea or even a business plan just yet. Here are 3 things that you can do to start your business with $0. First is research people and problems. Another thing to do is to test a concept without spending money. And third, practice being visible. Now, I knew for years before I started my business that I would eventually work for myself because I heard on a podcast many years ago, I can't even remember which podcast it was, but they said that if you want autonomy in your work, then work for yourself. And I don't know about you, but autonomy in my work and freedom in my work and the way that I live is very important to me. So I knew I would eventually work for myself. The thing is, though, that I was in some toxic work environments and they were mostly toxic because we were micromanaged. And it took all of my energy just to get through the day. So I wasn't focusing on how to start my business. I didn't even have a business idea because I was so focused on like me and my problems and like what skills do I have? How can I make money? I was really focused on how am I going to make money? But in hindsight, what I realize now is that there were some things that I could have focused on, with $0 or before I even had an idea, which probably would have made my first year in business a lot smoother than it was because I didn't start my business until after I was fired from a job. And I spent a lot of time in my first year trying to figure things out. And I realized in hindsight, I could have started those things sooner. So those are some things that I want to share with you and help you practice thinking like an owner. One of the mistakes that I made before launching my business was focusing too much on myself, on my own skills, on my business plan, thinking that I had to have a fully detailed, fleshed out business plan. But in my opinion, I don't think you need a full written business plan unless you have co-founders or unless you're looking for investors upfront. And I think in theory, like, of course, it makes sense that you would be trying to focus on a business idea because how else are you going to create a solution that is going to help people and make money? But before you do any of that, before even focusing on yourself, focus on the people. So the first thing to do is research. What are people talking about? What comes up? What common themes come up on online forums or, even on social media, though, use your discretion. What are people complaining about? What are people looking for a solution for? But just be mindful that sometimes people complain about things and they're not necessarily looking for a solution. Or there might be common themes that come up, but if you were to offer solutions, some people aren't willing to spend money or invest in it. And to get an idea of what people are willing to spend money on, take a look at what already exists. What's the competition? I think sometimes we get intimidated by competitors because we think like, oh, the market's oversaturated, or somebody's going to think that I stole their idea, or I'm behind, I'm too late, it already exists, so I can't, there's nothing that I can solve with my product or service. But I think that competition really just shows us that there is a need in the marketplace. And even if something looks similar to what you might want to create as a solution, there's probably a gap in what a competitor is offering, and you might be able to create something that looks similar to that, but solves that gap or fills that gap that your competitor has. So just because something already exists doesn't mean that you can't also create something that's in the same lane. Once you know what problems people have that they're willing to spend money on for a solution, that's when you can focus on you and your skills and the skills that you currently have or the skills that you need to learn in order to offer a solution for your target audience. Also, in the research phase, this is when you want to be doing some homework around business foundations and fundamentals. So, things such as different business structures, different business models, and sales and marketing, just to name a few things. So one of the biggest mistakes I made in my first year of business was following advice from someone who had a completely different business model than me. And that cost me time, that cost me money, and it cost me some momentum. There's so much information online and a lot of noise too. And everything doesn't apply to you. It doesn't apply to your business. It doesn't apply to your business model. If you're brand new, you don't necessarily need to follow advice from people who are 6 to 8 steps ahead of you. You want to look for people who have similar business models, who are maybe 1 or 2 steps ahead of you. And as you gather information in this research phase, you also want to focus on closing the gap between idea and execution quickly. There's a common cliche in business that says to fail fast. I technically don't believe in failure as a thing unless it's like an actual pass fail test, because what we call failure is really just feedback. And that feedback is information to help inform what you're going to do next. So, look at it as an experiment where even if it didn't work out the way that you thought it would, it gave you information so that when you try again, now you have data to make decisions from instead of, seeing what's out there. So now that you've done research, the next thing to do is to test a concept without spending any money. Now, again, this really applies to service-based businesses because I think that if you have a product-based business, you probably need some upfront capital in order to create a prototype so you can test it. So again, this really applies to service-based and online businesses. So once you have an idea or once you know what people are willing to spend money on and you know what skills you currently have or the skills that you need to gain in order to create a solution, now you want to test the first version of your offer. And again, this doesn't necessarily have to be something that's brand new. If you've done competitor analysis and you've identified a gap in their solution, you can create a test of an offer that addresses that gap. But really, during this test phase, this is where you want to learn and find out, is there a real need for what you're offering? Again, if you're creating or filling a gap from a competitor, there probably is a need, but you still want to test to make sure that what you've identified as a gap is a true gap. It's really about what your customers or clients say is something they're willing to spend money on. Because I think sometimes as business owners, we might think that we like know what people need, but at the end of the day, it's about your customers and your clients and what they actually need and what they're willing to spend money on. Now, when you're testing, you're not launching like what's going to be your final offer. You're launching a test. You're launching a pilot or, a founding member program or a beta version of what will eventually be your final offer. Because again, when you're testing, you're trying to figure out, is there a true need for this? Or is what you think is the solution, is it what people actually want? You have to make it about your customers and clients. So during the test phase, this is something also, testing is something that's also a skill that is going to come up again and again as an entrepreneur. As you create new offers, as you create new solutions, as you run new programs, you're going to test and iterate on it. And testing might look different as you grow, but that is something that you will continue to do in business. So you might as well get used to it before you spend any money. And another thing to do to start your business with $0 is to practice being visible. At the end of the day, Most CEOs are the face of the company. And, maybe you might have a co-founder or maybe you might be a faceless brand where you're not the face of your company. There still might be times where you do have to represent the brand. So practice being visible. Now, the thing about being visible is that this can be an area that is very uncomfortable for people because a lot of us might have a fear of being seen or a fear of being judged, or maybe we've been in situations before where we were visible or we did speak up and that was used against us. And it can also be difficult to be visible or show up as, the CEO version of you versus the 9 to 5 or corporate version of you. So I definitely want to address that because a lot of people will say, like, just be visible, put yourself out there, start, putting out more videos. But it does take practice. Let me know in the comments if you want me to do a video about how to become more comfortable on camera. I can definitely share some tips that I've learned in my own journey. So also the thing about being visible is you don't have to be everywhere. That was a mistake that I made in my first year of business. I thought I had to be on every platform, but as a solopreneur, that's just not realistic for me at this stage. So what you can do is just choose 1 to 2 platforms where you practice being visible and take some of the pressure off. As long as you share a point of view, a perspective, that's worth sharing, that's worth writing. If you're new to my channel, make sure that you hit that subscribe button and also be sure to like this video so that you'll keep seeing more content like this. What other topics do you want me to cover? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.